Hello everyone, welcome to the TwinCast pod. I'm Cam, and with me we have the plutonium boss himself. Go ahead and introduce yourself.
Oh, well, I'm Clark, and I guess if I'm the plutonium boss, we should put a giant thumbnail of my face on the this podcast thumbnail.
Yeah.
And then put a crosshair right on there, right? Just like in the Blaster Master box.
Yeah. I don't know about you, but that art on the box is some of my favorite, and it's... Although it's not...
Well,
it's not very indicative of what the game's about, though.
Well, you could tell that they certainly probably tested that for the American market and said, well, what do preteens like? They like shooting things, and they like big mutants at the time because of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
That's right.
So
yeah, I guess this came out in '88, and I guess Ninja Turtles was about the same time.
Right around that time.
Right around that same time.
Around that time, I would guess that's why they focused on mutants and all of that stuff.
Yeah. Well, if you haven't gathered, today we're going to be talking about Blaster Master, 1988 game for the NES by Sunsoft. Let's see. I guess maybe we should give a little bit of details about the game here. We've mentioned that it came out in 1988. Specifically, we have June 17th in Japan in 1988, and then November in 88. Made by Sunsoft. And yeah, anything else about this game?
No, I think that covers most of the main details of what we need to know.
Well, what kind of genre would you put Blaster Master in?
Well, it's definitely a Metroid-like. You can tell it's very inspired of the original Metroid, kind of a proto-Metroidvania, where it scrolls in all directions. It has really a non-linear layout. You're going to have to do a lot of backtracking to move through, and your upgrades will dictate which areas that you can go to. In fact, it was really my first game of that ilk. I didn't play Metroid until later, and so it kind of blew my mind that you could do that when we first figured that stuff out.
Metroid was only like a year before this one, so this is it's fairly early as far as this genre goes. And one thing that drew me to this game initially is just how wide open it is and non-linear. So yeah, I really liked the aspect of the searching levels and trying to figure out what you're gonna do. So okay. I know, we're twins, we grew up together, so we have a very similar experience with this game. But I'm gonna ask you, Clark, what's your first experience with Blaster Master?
Well, my first experience was probably when we bought it. So this is actually one of the more memorable things about video games in my childhood is that you and I had a paper out. Didn't get paid very much, and I remember it worked out where if we combined how much we got paid on our paper route, we could about get a video game. And so with other expenses, I think it took us a couple months, but when we finally had enough, we went down to the local grocery store by us. They had what they called the camera bar, where you would drop your film off, but they also had other electronics, including video games. And I don't remember exactly why we chose Blaster Master. I don't think we had played it before, so it must have been the box art. We must have looked at the back or something, but we picked out, for some reason, Blaster Master and brought it home. So that's really my first experience with it, is, booting it up, thinking it was kind of fun, but also a little bit confusing, because I remember it took us a little while to figure it out. So what about you?
Well, yeah, I remember going to good old Reams and picking it up there with our money. My first initial impressions of the game was that it was very hard. It took us a while we would go around and we're like, oh, what do we do here? I'm not sure if we read the instruction manual, not because we were like 8. No, I guess we may have been 9.
Yeah, we might have flipped through it, but I remember we weren't really as interested in that at that
So
time.
I just remember like, wow, what are we supposed to do in this game? And then I remember.
Well,
Go ahead.
well, we didn't even know how to go into like the overhead like layer or world parts, right?
Yeah.
Because I remember it took us a little while to figure that out, and it was kind of revelation. We figured out, oh, you need to hit down to enter the doors.
Well, I even remember figuring out. I have a memory of like the first time you actually exited the tank, and you were the little guy, and that was like, what? There's 2 different like modes just on the outside, and then not to mention even the overworld thing where you go into the dungeons, the instances there. Yeah, it was quite daunting for a 9 or 10-year-old, but I do remember being pretty blown away by the sprites and the colors and the graphics coming out of the Nintendo. Because up to that point, we had rented games and nothing too could really compare to this game at that point.
Yeah, I mean, this had to be one of the first games we bought or owned, because I mean, we had the Super Mario Duck Hunt like a lot of people. This couldn't have been too long after that one of the first games that we owned.
Yeah. Okay.
As far as what else I remember about this game, just early memories, is that we must have learned from Nintendo Powers or a friend or something that you could do the grenade trick. I remember that blowing my mind, that you could defeat a boss with one-hitter grenade, and if you timed your pause correctly, then it would be destroyed. So, secrets at this time of life, anyone who grew up in this time, it was kind of a magical thing, because you felt like you were breaking the rules, and it felt like you knew something that other people didn't when you figured that kind of thing out.
Yeah.
And then also just one little other highlight thing here is I just remember we played this for years, and I remember just getting the whole route to the level 5 boss burned into my memory. In fact, still to this day, I can kind of just do that route in my sleep, because those saves just did it over and over again.
Yeah, it was always one of those games where once I got older in life, I'd go back to it. I'm like, eventually I want to be able to just beat this game. I think probably in my early 20s or so, I probably beat the game with using save states on an emulator on a PC. But that didn't quite feel the same. So, I mean, like you, I would always get to the 5th level, the water level, and die to that crab boss. It was one of the most frustrating games because this game does not have any saves at all. You have to do it all in one go. And the American version you only get 3 continues. And after 3 continues, you get game over. So it can be very frustrating.
Brutal.
It's brutal. But going on with one of more our experiences that we had with this game, a couple years ago, when you and I still got into like collecting some older video games and stuff, one of the things I wanted to do was beat the game on our original cart that we bought on our original Nintendo. And I sat down and I played and got good at it. In fact, I think you and I were practicing for speedrunning and stuff. And I said, what, I'm gonna do Master Blaster. Or Blaster Master. I did it. I swapped it. I did what our sister used to call it. Anyways, I sat down and I played it, and then I remember the day that I beat it through from the start without using any save states. I was on the original hardware, on the original cartridge. I was so excited. I took a picture and I sent it to you, and I said, I did it.
Yeah, you beat the demons of the past, right?
Yes,
this is you were high-fiving your 8-year-old self or whatever, however old we were at the time.
Yeah, that's right. How about you? Have you ever played through the game like from start to finish all the way without save states?
I have not. So not like you. I did play through it with save states this time. I feel like if I sat down and maybe like you and I dedicated an afternoon to it, I probably could get good enough.
You could do it, and you've seen me.
Yeah.
You've seen me do it recently, where I've gone through it all the way through, and so you know routes and all that.
In
stuff.
fact, this last time that I did it, I actually beat the crab boss without having to restart my save. I did the strafe trick that we never knew about growing up.
Oh.
And strafed around, and I had, I think, 1 gun power, so I was able to stay toward the bottom of the screen, and I just strafed back and forth, hit all the bubbles as they were coming down, and I was good.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I did save state it, but I think at this point I probably could get all the way to probably, like, the second frog boss, which is the 7th boss, right? Is that the 7th boss?
The
Or
second
is it
frog.
sixth
The
boss?
second frog boss is the 7th boss. Yes.
Yeah, so I could probably get to that point right now without any problems, without any save states. But I think I would have to practice that boss. Well, the last 3 bosses I would have to practice, I think.
Yeah. Once you.
And maybe getting through some of the tricky areas there in 8, I would probably need to practice that.
Yeah. This takes a little practice. You can just practice on an emulator at those parts, and then you'll be able to get through. So at this point, we were talking about this game, but maybe we should go into a little bit more in depth about the game itself for those who aren't familiar with Blaster Master. Can you describe basic gameplay and the point of the game?
Yeah, so I guess if we start with the point, the point is to save your frog. And it was the pinnacle of cinematic gameplay in 1988. It had really cool cutscenes, and I would encourage everyone who's maybe listening to this to go look at the beginning cutscene to Blaster Master. But in short, it has Jason and his pet frog just chilling, and then his pet frog escapes, jumps out into his backyard, gets up on a I guess radioactive box that's in his backyard, grows big, jumps down a hole. Jason goes after him because he just is hyper focused on his pet. Jumps down that hole. Luckily, there's a tank down there, and he suits up and drives the tank after Fred. So
Well,
the whole point is to get Fred.
it is notable that this was during the 80s, and there was a Cold War going on, right? And we were all hyper focused on nuclear winter, and we all had radioactive sludge in our backyards. This is America, after all. Every one of our backyards was a Superfund site, right?
Yeah.
And then
But
panic rooms and tanks in our backyards. So
so I guess it makes more sense. But if you can't tell, like the story is mostly nonsense. In fact, it's not even related to the original Japanese story at all. They just kind of put this on top of the Japanese story. In fact, you go down the hole after Fred, then all of a sudden you're in a whole outdoor level after going down underground. So it doesn't make any sense. They put that in there to appeal to the American market, I think. And you know what? It worked. The music gets you pumped up, you blast off, and then you're immediately in this really cool tank. And that's really the star of the show, is the tank. The gameplay plays out with you driving your tank around, 8 varied levels, quite a bit different between levels. And the tank has unique physics. You're jumping around. You have a sort of inertia, like you jump and you get a sense of momentum, but you can, it's not like some of the Ghost and Goblins type games where you commit to a jump and you're on that path. No, you can still change directions, but it does have real weight to it when you're jumping around. And one of the things I always really appreciated too, I don't think it really affected it too much, but the wheels on Sophia the Third, which is the name of your tank, spin at different rates and kind of independent of your take. And it makes it actually just all feel really pretty cool as you're jumping around once you get used to the physics of how you jump around, you can feel pretty expert as you're jumping around, which is, to me, one of the highlights of the whole game. Of course, this is just one aspect, one half of the game. As Cameron mentioned earlier, you shortly discover that you can jump out of your tank. And I guess one of the cool parts of that is that you feel really underpowered when you jump out of your tank. In fact, there's some parts, level designs, which I think are pretty cool, where they require you to jump out of your tank to access other parts of the level that you can only access as your squishy little Jason character. And when you get out, you feel really vulnerable, and all of a sudden these other enemies that you were just destroying with your tank, you now can die really easy too. So that is one cool thing.
I feel really squishy.
Yeah. But then when you're navigating the world, you'll find these dungeons, little doors that you jump out of your tank, you enter the door, and now all of a sudden you're in a top-down sort of mode. And this, I mean, you can kind of think of maybe Zelda. You're much bigger than Zelda is. You're exploring these dungeons. It's not, I mean, it's a little bit maze-like, but it's not like Zelda where you have puzzles and things to solve in there. You're just exploring, trying to find where the boss is. And most of these levels have 4 or 5 of these different portals that will take you to these dungeons. And one of them has a boss. So you're just looking for the one that has the boss. And the ones that don't have the boss, they're really only there if you want to try to power up your gun or get sub-weapons for your tank. I don't know about you, but I would mostly just beeline it to the one with the boss and beat the boss, get the upgrade for the tank, and then try to get to the next level.
Yep. Okay, go ahead. Keep going.
Well, I was just going to say, you should actually jump in here. What are your thoughts?
Oh, well, I'm just going to just to add on. So, yeah, it follows the Metroid plan of getting the next power-up in order to move on to the next level. So sometimes you'll get a power-up for your tank that will make your gun stronger so you can go break a wall. Or you might get like a hover upgrade that makes it so you can fly up to a higher ledge so you can move on to the next area. Or sometimes it's a literal just key that opens up a door. So, yeah, I was just going to mention that.
Yeah, so you have to get all of those in the Zelda top-down-esque view, but those are all applicable to the tank levels to open up your exploration in the tank. I guess we can start talking about strengths and weaknesses. We talked about how amazing it feels to jump around in the tank. The top-down levels seem several steps down. I always want to blaze through most of those. They're not fun. Your gun is a little bit off-centered, so like lining up some shots is a little bit awkward. The design of the levels don't really feel that. I mean, they're okay.
Well,
really the highlight of it is the bosses.
Yeah, I was gonna say about the gun, the game design choices they made with your overhead gun is as you're going around and you're killing, you can power up your little gun. You pick up these little power ups for your gun, but there's eight powers and it gets stronger and stronger. And the top one is really strong. It blasts this like big thing that can go through walls and kill lots of things. But I found that as you're playing this game, it will almost never get all the way to the top because they every time you get hit and your power goes down, your gun power also goes down, and you're getting hit all the time because there are things that you can't avoid. Like you walk into a room and there'll be all of a sudden an enemy just right there, and you just take damage, and it's really hard to avoid taking any kind of damage. So, if it's one thing that would make those overhead sections better is they wouldn't be so punishing on taking damage, and you can use your cool guns a little bit more. But
yeah, and finally, some of the bosses get kind of ridiculous too. Like we'll talk about it in the graphics section. They look cool, but they're just really bullet spongy, and they follow a set pattern. But a lot of times there's only certain windows that you can hit the boss. And so while they look cool, in practice, most of them really aren't that fun because it becomes a test of endurance where you just have to like dodge around for a long time until you get your window, and then you get a couple hits in and then you have to dodge around for a long time. So when you get good and when you get a lot of practice under your belt, it negates some of that, but it's still a little bit too bad that with just a few design tweaks, that part could have been a lot better.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit more granularly about each of the levels. You mentioned level 1. It's kind of like it's like an outside of you're in a forested area, and there's lots of interesting monsters in the background, really cool. There's some water areas in the first area. What else am I missing? What else describes the first area there? The music is really good in the first area. And anyway,
yeah, and you'll get it burned into your memory.
And one thing that you notice when you first start the game, you come in and there's a ledge above you as you start the game. And you're like, huh, why is that ledge there? And then we didn't realize what it was until maybe, I don't know, a year later or so, that once we got far enough to get the hover upgrade, you're like, oh, I can go back to that area and use the hover. So I thought that was some pretty good game design right there for 1988.
Yeah, I mean, that had been around in other games before, but it was the first time that you and I had experienced it. It blew our young little preteen minds.
Yeah. So at the end of the first level, you get a gun that makes it so you can blast through this little, I guess it's like a doorway, but it's an enemy. So I guess it's kind of, it's the only time this enemy shows up, that you have a gun strong enough to defeat that guy, and then you're able to go through and move to Area 2. How would you describe Area 2, Clark?
Well, Area 2 is lots of bricks. I think it's supposed to be some sort of underground city.
Yeah.
You enter in sort of like a doorway when you enter that level, but there's lots of lava, and I remember it's quite a bit larger than the first area, so probably by about twice. And if you don't have a map, then you're going to be doing a lot of exploring, which I'm sure we did, to figure out where to go. And
there's some really annoying enemies that you in this one. There's these little worm things, and I always hated those when we went in there because you can't shoot they're too low to the ground to shoot with your tank. So
yeah, the designers, I think, intended you to get out of your tank to shoot them with Jason, which is just, it's kind of annoying. It slows everything way down.
Yeah, ain't nobody got time for that.
Yeah, so my favorite thing to do with those guys is to switch over to the heat-seeking and then do a jump and then shoot my heat-seeking missiles out.
Yeah, when I was attempting to be quick, when speedrun the game a little bit, I would just jump over them. I just pretty much ignore them. So
yeah, there's also some other really cheap enemies that drop bombs on you from above.
Oh, also yes.
Well, what's mostly annoying about them is they're not too bad in most areas, but there's some really cramped areas where you go through like a transition screen into the new area, and there's nothing you can do. They just poop a bomb on you, and you take two damage.
And those bombs last forever. Like you sit there like, okay, are they going to explode? They're not exploding, and then they roll and hit you.
Yeah,
they're just annoying. So
this is the first boss also in this area too, where you could do the grenade trick, which there was one time I just remember that we knew about it. We thought it was really cool. I remember one time we had to go out for dinner and we left the bomb hurting the boss during the entire duration of dinner.
Yeah, you pause it and it continues to take damage. Yeah, and we just went up for dinner. That boss sure got it. It's this big like lobster thing with big lobster arms and claws. So, yeah.
Like a rock lobster.
Yeah, like a rock lobster. And he gives you another gun upgrade, so you can blast through even more blocks and stuff like
Which
that.
I mean, if we get to it in the, I pulled up some Reddit comments on this, and that was one of the comments, is that it felt a little bit inelegant design to have two kind of medium, kind of weak upgrades to start. You just had two separate gun upgrades that mostly means that you can shoot different types of either an enemy or block, but it doesn't actually make you do any more damage to enemies and stuff. So
Yeah.
a little bit disappointing.
All right, in the third area, you go into this, like, I don't know, like an industrial area, would you say? Like, there's like...
It's like futuristic,
metals.
like a factory.
Yeah. And I really do kind of like that level. But I wouldn't say... I guess that the thing that kind of stands out about this level is they have these things that fly at you in the sky, like, we call them ladybugs. They got all those. But the thing about this level is you wind through the whole level. It's pretty linear, actually. There's not much to get lost. So it's a very long level as you wind through it. But on the way back, after you beat the boss, the boss is this like cube dude that multiplies and stuff like that. He's actually one of the harder kind of bosses. But after you beat him, you get this hover upgrade, and then you're able to actually skip most of the way heading back with your hover upgrade. Kind of teaches you, like, oh, look, I can go up here and leave really quickly. So I always appreciated that that design. Anything else that you stand out to you for level 3?
Well, there's the little mouths that drop the worms on top of you.
Oh, the pink worms.
Which are, yeah, and those are kind of annoying, but specifically when you're backtracking back out through it, there's an area where, like, you're jumping up, and you jump up and the screen scrolls up where the thing drops it down here. It's almost impossible to avoid taking damage, and I always hate
You're
that
going
part.
to take a lot of damage there. All right, so this is the point where you realize, oh, I got this hover. Then you have to backtrack all the way back through Area 3 and then back through Area 2 and go all the way back to the start of Area 1 in order to make it to Area 4. Which is really cool. And as you hit the the beginning of Area 1, you fly up, you have to use your hover thing, and then they have these little ledges that you have to do. And I always remember being worried I wasn't going to make it all the way to the top. Because they have these little guys that stand on the ledges and jump at you. But if you are able to come up, you get the little hover power up, and you're able to make it all the way to the top.
Yeah, and then that whole area is like a sewer that you go explore.
Yeah, Area 4 is like a sewer.
It's much more maze-like than Area 3. So you can wander around in there for a little while if you don't know where to go. And I remember the boss is a frog, and I remember wondering if it was Fred.
Yep. Well, I think we
spoilers,
the first time we got
Fred.
there, we thought it was Fred. Why are we attacking our own pet here?
Yeah.
But no, yep, like you said. Do you remember? This is the level where the upgrade is actually just literally a key. You get a key because there's a locked door at the end, towards the beginning of the map that you have to go back up to and unlock the door. And that's one of the sections where you actually have to get out of your tank. You unlock the door and you have to get out and be a little Jason and climb up this big ladder in order to unlock the door from the other side. I remember always being stressed about that because I'm not sure if you mentioned this. Jason does not like high distances. Like if you
We haven't
there
mentioned
could be a
that yet.
little tiny ledge, and if you jump high off the ledge and then land on it, you could just die. So I always remember being super worried at this point. But if you're able to make it down and unlock the door and get back in your thing, then you hit to the Area 5 that used to always be our demise.
Yeah, and this is the water world. And, you know, I hinted at this earlier, but I always really appreciated the design of this because you have to basically you get into the water and you sink down in your tank all the way to the bottom, but you can't get back up because it's water. The tank can't. So you sink down all the way to the bottom, then you're forced to get out and do about half of the level as Jason.
Oh.
So you're swimming around. All these big creatures are there. You feel so vulnerable, and it's really cool. And I think this is the best level design of the game, and I really like going through that area. Even today, it's really fun.
Yeah, it's one of my
going
favorite
through that
sections
area.
today, but I remember when we were young, this was where we all
Stressful.
We were super stressed, and we could do it, but we'd die a bunch of times, and then by the time we got to the boss, we really didn't stand a chance against the boss. So.
Yeah, so I mean, this is where our journey always ended as kids. So it wouldn't be until I was probably 17 or 18. I think you mentioned this. We got the first emulators came out with save states that we were able to actually save state it through there and finally beat that. And it was eye-opening to get. You kind of knew what the upgrade was going to be, right? Because you couldn't get out without being able to swim in your tank.
You get a.
But that. Oh,
I was just say yeah. You get a swim upgrade for your tank. But yeah.
yep, you get a swim upgrade to your tank. Now you can swim around, and there's a little bit more of a level to explore in the tank. But then you can get to area 6, which is the ice level, right?
Yeah.
Yes, the ice level.
So, yeah, we didn't have much experience of this as a kid because we never got there. But I thought it was a pretty cool level as I played it later on when I was older. It's pretty hard. The ice is really slippery. It's not very forgiving. But once you get used to it, it's not terrible.
Yeah, you got to kind of relearn a little bit of the physics of your tank in the level. It's got a bunch of like little puzzly areas where you have to like destroy some blocks and then jump up and then pause the game and then the blocks reappear, and that's how you kind of get like scale up a few areas. I guess there's probably other ways to do it. You could probably shoot them out. And
Yeah, I'm sure you can make it. That's always what I did.
Yeah.
One thing about this level is it punishes you pretty hard if you get to that kind of the top of the level, but then so there's really tough platforming at the top of the level, and if you fall off the platforms, you go like all the way down to the beginning of the level, and it's really annoying
you have
to try to get back.
go do it again.
So what I always would say, like if you're doing this level, try to have full hover. So like as you're, because a lot of the times it's just easier just to hover over to the next platform just to be safe.
Yeah.
Take use of.
Or have a save state.
Yeah.
If you're playing on emulator.
That's right. Okay, the boss of this level. Do you remember what the boss is of this level?
Yes, the boss of this level is another like crab lobster thing. Oh, yep, right there. But it's not that. It's the upgraded version of
Yeah,
that.
it's the more powerful version of the crab boss that you fight in Area 2. So
Yeah.
you can use
Reusing the assets, which is what they unfortunately had to do with the limited memory.
well, and that also means that you could use the pause trick on him, so he's not.
Yeah.
So, but the upgrade you get from this guy is the wall climbing. So you get you can climb on and go up and down on walls, on the vertical walls.
Yeah, so then after backtracking all the way back to Area 2, you find the entrance to Area 7,
Yeah,
right?
you go back to Area 2, and then you go to Area 7. And for my money, Area 7 is the worst area in the whole thing. It kind of feels like...
Well, in fact, 7 and 8, it felt like they were running out of steam. Like they were maybe trying to finish the game. They were hurrying things out because the level design basically drops off.
Especially this level, because there's just long hallways, and you're going through these hallways, and then they just like throw enemies at you from the sky. It's like, here's an enemy, it's falling from the sky, and it's like, okay. And there's some like there's a lot of like dirt and stuff that you have to like shoot out and go through and stuff like that. It's really not that interesting of a level. So,
Yeah, the boss in that is probably one of the harder bosses, at least for me. It's the fire frog. Right?
Yeah.
So it's
he's hot.
reskin version of the frog. You can do the pause trick on it, but it's a little bit harder to get
It's
off,
hard,
right?
and if he hits you, it takes like down 2 damage. So he can kill you pretty quick, and you have to be.
You know, I think if you practice, at least I've seen on some speedrun videos, that you can actually kind of reliably get behind him and do some damage. At least in some of the speedruns that I've seen. So
Well,
if you're looking for some pro strats, maybe look
yeah,
up some
I
videos.
found it kind of easier to try to get to the side. Like I would go to the side of him and try to. You can hit him from the side with your bomb and pause it if you're quick enough. But because if you try to stand right in the middle, that's when he shoots his fireball and tongue at you. So you get,
Yeah, but when you beat this guy, you get the worst upgrade in the game.
yeah,
right?
you do. It's the
It's the one that actually downgrades the experience.
yeah, like you can now climb on the ceiling, and so it actually makes platforming harder because the way it works is like you come up to a ledge, and a lot of times you'll go to jump, but it grabs on and like takes you underneath the ledge, and if you're not careful, you'll hit the button and you'll fall down into some lava and die.
And it just so happens that you have to go backtrack to get to level 8, and that's through World 3 that you have to backtrack into. And it just so happens that that world is full of spikes that are right next to the edges of platforms, and at this point your tank wants to grab a hold of all the ledges and things, and so you'll just, especially if you're not used to it, you'll just drive right into the spikes with your upgrades.
Yeah, it's very annoying. But at this point, you've invested an hour and a half in the game or whatever, and you're like, I just gotta push through.
Yeah, and while level 8 might not be as bad a level design as 7, it's still kind of bad. There's like whole sections that you can you have to be jumping around these spikes, and you can skip past a lot of it if you just willingly take damage.
That's what I would
to
do.
it.
So
Yeah.
I'd suggest anyone who goes into level 8, there's this little section that you go down. It's a bio horror kind of level. It looks like you're going into like anuses and intestines, and it's really kind of gross. But anyways, the first little area you go into, there's a bunch of worms. There's both the red worms and the gray worms. So what you do is I grab onto the sidewall and just carry them all the way down to the bottom, and then just kill them all. And the red ones drop hover, and the gray ones replenish your health. So I just kill those things, grab the hover and whatever, and then I go up to the beginning of it, and I leave the level, and I come back in, and I just do it again until I have my hover all the way full. Because if you have your hover all the way full, it makes some of the sections much easier. In fact, there's one section where you have to have hover in order to pass it. So make sure you're full.
Now, what's interesting about this level 2 is there's 2 bosses, and I remember reading somewhere or hearing someone say that there was supposed to actually be an additional level, but they didn't have the time to flesh out the additional level, so they just stuck the extra boss in right after the first boss of this level, and so you fight the plutonium boss first, and then you fight the master boss, I don't know his name, afterwards. And if you didn't know what you're doing, and you hadn't seen any strategies, you didn't have save states, man, I don't know how you would ever get good enough to do this, because you would die pretty quick. There's no getting around it. And then if you were out of continues, you'd have to start all the way back at the beginning just to get to there to practice those 2 bosses. And there are tricks to beat those 2 bosses for sure, but if you didn't know what to do or you haven't practiced it, it's going to take a long time to get back.
Yeah, I don't think there was any way I would have been able to do that back in the day without internet help. But yeah, those bosses. I mean, the plutonium boss. Yeah, he's tough, but he's doable because you can just shoot your bombs up and it kind of pushes the little things he shoots down at you right up there. So I could see myself maybe beating the plutonium boss, but the guy with his whip after that, he is just he takes so much damage, and if you don't know the trick to beating him, he'd be really really hard.
Yeah, to legitimately beat him would be. I mean, I won't say impossible, but it would be extremely difficult. And
Fortunately, he's right-handed, and all I have to do is move all the way to the right hand of the board, and he can't really hit you with his whip. So, so after you beat the game, how satisfied were you with the ending? You want to describe? Do you want to do spoilers here?
spoiler tag, I guess skip ahead if you don't want to see what happens at the end of the game. A game that is 35 years old or whatever. 36 years old, I guess. But yeah, you're standing on a ledge, looking over the vista of I guess it's supposed to be the layer where the mutants are at, hanging out, chilling with your frog, and goes to the credits, and then at the very end it says "very thanks."
in the awesome translation of the English.
Yes.
So yeah, it turns out the plutonium boss was just guarding your frog the whole time, and you were able.
He just wanted a pet.
So yeah, it's still I enjoy the ending, and I think it's pretty cool. But
it's just so cute to see the little frog sitting there next to you on your tank. It's like they Photoshop him in. If you see the Japanese version,
they almost literally photoshopped him in because
yeah. So you got a little frog chilling there. So, yeah, I mean it's obviously kind of hokey, but I love it.
Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about how you feel about we talked about this already. The graphics of the game. How were
It's really great. In fact, it stands still to this day as some of the best on the NES. The colors are awesome. Each area is varied with lots of detail. The bosses are amazing. We talked about that. It's actually a little reminiscent of like sort of I guess when you think of a boss rush game on NES, you think of like Mike Tyson's Punch-Out. It's kind of like that, just big bosses that take up the whole screen. They did a really cool trick where they black out the background and then they use the background tiles to form, because there's usually limits on how many sprites can be on the screen for just regular sprites. So to get around that, they use the background tiles. And they look great.
the bosses?
I don't know what else I can say.
Bosses are almost just like the standout of this game if you were just looking at it. I mean, we've kind of poo-pooed like the actual how boss fights go, but the boss fights are incredibly... The bosses are incredibly huge, and it's just awesome to look at. So, yeah, I agree. I agree 100% with your take on the boss fights.
And the graphics, like I said, right up there with the best on the NES. So,
yeah. Well, let's see. As we've played it and prepared for this podcast, I know that you have exposed some of those members of your family to this game. Can you tell them?
Well, yeah. One of the big purposes of us doing these conversations and hyper-focusing on a game is to get a perspective on if the game is still like worthwhile to pick up today, if people can have fun playing it. And so I put my kids in front of it. I have a 14, almost 15-year-old and a 11-year-old, and put them both in front of it. Told them I was recording it. Maybe I can put some of the video from Post in here of them playing the game. And I told them, hey, play this. I'll give you a little bit of direction, but I'm not gonna tell you a ton. And go. And they struggled. In fact, with my help, I told them how to jump out of the tank and kind of climb down that first ladder They kind of all got to that point, and at that point they were kind of done. Like, but I asked them about it, and I think they said it was fun. I think they mostly thought it was fun because they were being recorded, and that that I was, talking to them about it.
Are you saying that they didn't have the itch the next day to come back and play more?
No, they did not. So at least if you're 11 and 14 years old, I think it's going to be a real tough task to grab someone like that when they've been playing Stardew Valley or they've been playing
Minecraft.
Yeah, like this game takes a lot more dedication to get to the point where it's fun, and it didn't seem to be grabbing them that well. But I think they like the concept. They like the old game. They like that this is what Dad played when he was our age or whatever. They like the idea of like them being recorded doing it. But I don't think this is something that they're ever going to wake up and say, "Hey, Dad, can I go play Blaster Master?"
Yeah. I have a similar experience with my kids. My 7-year-old, I put her in front of the game, and she played for 5-10 minutes and couldn't make it past the first screen. She's 7, so you can't do too much about it. So, but my kids are they like watching me play these games, even though they might not like playing it themselves. They enjoy sitting and watching me and me explaining what's going on and how this was a very influential game when I was growing up. So they really do appreciate these games, and they can sit down and watch someone play it, but maybe not play it themselves. Well, I know that you asked a question on a Reddit forum, right?
Yeah, so I went and did some homework ahead of this podcast and went to one of my favorite subreddits. It's just the retro gaming subreddit. And I just asked their opinion on Blaster Master in 2024, what they thought. Like, is it still fun? Is it nostalgia glasses? Like, if they do like it, is it just nostalgia glasses, like, giving them that opinion? And I got lots of responses. And so I've pulled out some responses. I just want to some of them are going to echo some of the things that we've said here, but it's going to be a different perspective. It's, as with anything, there's a little bit of a selection bias here. Like, this is the forum for retro games. So everyone who's on this forum is kind of on board with old games already. So there is some negative feedback from there, but it's generally going to be positive, and let's just kind of go through it here. So Zima Gachi says, it's an excellent game, one that I expect a lot of its potential audience doesn't even realize has a whole secondary isometric Fester's Quest-like out-of-the-tank sub-game mode that breaks up the Nintendo hard, in quotes, platforming bits. But yes, it is Nintendo hard, and this is a term that they use quite a bit on the subreddit, is Nintendo hard. And it has its own unique physics that you just have to master. Blaster Master, if you will. So, what do you think about that comment, Ken?
I mean, yeah, I think he's got it right on. I mean, you and I, he says the overhead sections are kind of a breakup of the harder sections. And I guess that's true, but a lot of the times when I'm playing it, like going to the overhead sections, I was kind of like I have to do this section. So I'm not sure if I agree completely, but I can see how people might feel it is kind of a respite of a harder part of the game.
But overall, I think his sentiment is sort of mine too. Is that it is hard, like it's going to you're going to have to master some things to get enjoyment out of this game. So you have to do your homework. You have to get good at a few things before you can enjoy this game. So I like his points there. See, the next one I pulled out is from Anonymotron 42. And they say I bought it with Christmas money in 1988, so kind of a similar story to us, using some personal money to get the game. Soon after purchasing my control deck, I was intrigued by the article in the third Nintendo Power issue. It quickly became my favorite NES game of all time. It was a little difficult for its time, especially with no save or password feature. Again, a recurring theme you'll see in here. But I finally beat it legitimately 5 years later. So this guy,
he's dedicated.
Yeah, he beat it before, I guess this would have been 1993 when he beat it. So congrats to him. I don't know if he had to go look up things online, because I guess that would have been early in the
internet
days,
yeah, getting on some
he
forums.
Probably could have.
There would have been forums and stuff.
But yeah, either way, like even if he had to do that, like, big congrats to him. I definitely think it holds up in terms of graphic and music. The game story is too simple. Oh, come on, Frog. He says the Famicom original game story is better. But the Worlds of Power book for the game set the standard for future sequels. So, first mention of the Worlds of Power. I actually haven't read that. I don't know if you took a look at it.
I didn't actually look through it, but I've heard people describe it, the book. But yeah, I'm not really interested in it. I'm sure it's fine for what it was, but
yeah. Anyways, this guy has some similar experiences with us, but he actually powered through and beat it where we had not. Maybe he was a little bit older than us, or maybe he was just a game master or whatever. But
still took him 5 years.
Yeah. All right, next guy. Welcome, They say, I think it's worth a try. You'll have the maps and walkthroughs, so that's a good point. Like, I agree with him. Like, if you're gonna try this game today, go find a walkthrough.
Watch a YouTube video.
GameFAQ or whatever. Don't go in blind. It's not going to be worth your time. And with save states, you can make it to the end in good time. The later levels aren't much more difficult than the earlier ones, which I think is mostly true. There's some maybe a little bit more difficult things, but then he says, I hate that you lose gun power when you get hit more and the lack of a password system. Again, echoing things that we've talked about. The controls are also loose. There's a section of You Can Beat Video Games, which is a YouTube channel, for Blaster Master where he speeds up the video because you're backtracking. I never really mind the backtracking that much, but I guess he did. He says, still a worthy title even today. Nothing gets you in the mood to game quite like the Blaster Master intro section. So, yes. All right, maybe we'll pull out one or two of these. Fear the Monster says, it's one of my favorite games of all time. I do think it's still very fun, but only with save states. The more frustrating part to me was actually neither the gun level dropping nor the lack of passwords, but rather some of the cooler mechanics not being there until later in the game. For instance, of the first 4 power-ups, only one is a true differentiating feature, the hover. I really disliked that the first 2 were just upgraded cannons and the 4th was just a one-time use key. Honestly, it would have been cooler if some of the weapon upgrades, like homing missiles, were unlocked in levels 1 and 2. It's not like you need those upgrades to pass through those early levels anyway, and would have felt more like an accomplishment. You could have had easily the Guardian in level 1 only shootable via homing missiles. For instance, yes. I always found the lack of really cool stuff not happening until after World 5, which was already multiple hours into gameplay, as what kept it from being in the very top echelons of NES games.
I think
and I do agree with that. Do you agree?
I think that's legitimate gripes right there. Yeah.
Hindsight is 20/20, right? With 36 years of gameplay refinements. I think that, yes, if we were to go make this game from scratch, that would be something.
One thing that I thought would have been more cool in this game is if you actually got to fight some bosses as the tank, instead of having all the bosses just be in
Now that's one thing they did in Blaster Master
Yeah.
Zero, which I'm sure
Yeah.
you know, which was
Yeah.
cool.
It would have been cooler in this game, and I mean, you can kind of think of that like gateway at the end of the first area there as kind of like a boss, but it's not really. But
Yeah. I think that sums up a lot of the feelings here. Maybe I can stick a link to this Reddit thread in the notes here at the bottom. So if you want to go check out what everyone has said and comment there, you can. Really fun though to get everyone's responses to what they feel about Blaster Master today.
well, I think we should go over a little bit about the music here before we finish up, because I don't know about you, Clark, but I really enjoy the music in this game. I think it's really well done. There's some really standout tunes here, starting with even just the little opening, little eerie little music they have during the cutscenes. But
Yep. Well, let's add these tracks in post. So editor, add that track here.
it's a little spooky sound. And then another standout is just the Area 1. I don't know if it's because it's burned in my mind, because that's what you always get when you start the game, and you're almost always spending the most of your time in Area 1. But that's a great tune too. And then I know you have a particular favorite that you've discovered recently.
Yeah, I mean, I said 1 too, but I wanted to call out Area 6. It's one that I obviously didn't hear until I was older, because I could never get past level 5 boss, but I remember getting to level 6 and being like really impressed with level 6 theme. So we'll put those in here too, so you can hear the level 6 theme. Really, really good stuff. And I agree, Area 1 was also really, really good. And it's just Sunsoft was really on their game. I don't know how they mastered the sound chip of the NES, but they did, and their other games have really awesome sounds.
Yeah, Batman's good.
Batman, Journey to Silius, those are the ones that stand out to me. But yeah, they in fact, a lot of those songs don't sound a lot like other NES tunes, which I appreciate. Like, really great.
All right, now's the moment of truth where we get down to brass tacks and we rank this game and how we feel about it and what its legacy should be today. So we've come up with a tier ranking here. It's an S through F tier ranking, and there's a numerical value for each of these. So it starts with S, and we would rank an S as would be one of the best games, even if it was released today. That would be worth 6 points. And then there would be, it'd go on, the next one would be A, where nostalgia helps carry it today, but it's still an all-time great and fun to play. That would be worth 5 points. And then you got a B, would be still fun game to play, but would not separate itself from the pack today. That would be 4. And then C would be fun to play for 10 minutes or so, and then you move on. 3 points. And then D would be nostalgia alone is not enough to get you to turn this game on. 2 points. And then F, not only is it not good today, it wasn't even good back in the day. 1 point for that game.
Yeah. And just a quick note, like the number system there is like if we have to average our score, we just add them up and divide by 2. Or if we have like a sub-host on here, we can divide by 3.
Yeah.
I take the average to get our score.
So I give this game an A. I think nostalgia definitely has a big role in me. Big role for me in this game. I love this game. It's one of our first games we played, but I still think it holds up today, as long as you're able to maybe bring up a guide, watch a YouTube video. You can still have a lot of fun with this game, and you'll find a lot of fun in exploring the maps, listening to the music, and enjoying the tank physics of this game. I think this is an all-time great on the NES, and it's one of my favorite games ever. And so I give it an A.
Yeah, and I generally agree. I put A minus on here, just maybe a slight step below that. I pretty much agree with all your points there. Like, nostalgia helps me love this game. I am in love with the boss sprites. I'm in love with the music. A lot of nostalgia with this game, but I recognize all the faults. Like, there's just, you have to, as I said earlier, you have to have a certain level of skill to really enjoy this game. So I think anyone that can overcome that barrier of skill and then looking up guides and things like that can really get a lot of game out of this game and appreciate sort of the unique role that it plays in the history of the NES library. It's not as big as the Zelda, but it was covered extensively in Nintendo Power, and a lot of people really still love this game. So it has a place in the pantheon of great NES games, in my opinion.
All right, so you give it an A minus. Is that what, like a 4.5?
Yeah, so we are just like, what, 4.75 average, which we'll round up. We give it an A.
All right, well, to wrap things up, why don't we just talk a little bit about the legacy of this game and some of the games that maybe it spawned. We can mention those briefly. We don't have to talk very extensively about this, but do you remember, the game that came after this? And I have a vague memory of this game, but I don't think I never played it. It was a Game Boy game, Blaster Master Jr.
Yeah, Blaster Master Jr. or Blaster Master Boy.
Nah, that's what it was. Blaster Master Boy. That's what it was. Nah, I've never really played it. It's just a reskinned Bomberman game.
Yeah, I mean, it's got the sprites. I mean, it kind of works as a Blaster Master game a little bit in concept.
I've emulated it once or
terrible.
twice, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'm kind of the same way. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's not really a Blaster Master game, even if it has some things that link it back up.
I would say check it out, but it's
yeah, go emulate it or watch a video. It's kind of interesting to see, and once you know that it's a Bomberman game, you can't miss it.
And then I think the next game to carry the Blaster Master name would be the Genesis game, Blaster Master 2. And
yeah,
that is a bad game.
It is a very bad game. We actually had a friend who had that game. I don't know if you remember that. And I remember thinking that it was bad back then, and we were probably only 13 years old. The graphics, maybe on the surface, look upgraded, but they're janky, and it just didn't have the same charm in the graphics. So I actually take the graphics on the NES version, and the gameplay is just 3 steps down in almost every category.
The music is definitely a Genesis music. If you've ever heard the music, it's got.
Yeah, you can definitely hear that Genesis sound chip.
All right, the next game that came out was the Game Boy Color game, and this one actually felt like it was like a true sequel. Blaster Master Enemy Below. I was just playing it earlier and messing around with it, and it feels a lot like Blaster Master. Just
a sluggish version of Blaster Master.
It reuses. It seems like it just reuses a lot of assets too, because it's like the sprites are the same, has the same music and everything like that. I had
kind of only in like 3 or 4 channels.
Yeah, it doesn't sound as good. But I didn't get very far in this game. But it looks like it should be pretty fun. If you are ever curious, I think it should be a pretty fun game.
It does carry some, like, we didn't really talk about this in our main discussion, but we kind of highlighted it off to the side, but one of the negatives is there's not really a lot of reasons to go into this the optional dungeons. This one is the first game to really give you a reason to go into the optional dungeons. You have to go get a key before you go into the boss dungeon. So I did appreciate that a little bit.
And let's see, the next game would be the PlayStation game?
Yeah, and I'd actually just purchased a copy of that myself, so I have it over here somewhere. It's not terrible, like as you might expect. What I do appreciate about it is that the tank feels fun to control, but unfortunately, it's got lots of loading screens. It's got the PlayStation 1 graphics.
The 3D
that is
3D
definitely-
graphics that just kind of don't hold up as well today.
Yeah, they don't hold up as well. And it's an interesting play. It's a little bit hard to power through because of the loading times. I played for a good hour and a half, and it's okay. It's not going to really pull me back to it, but I would say maybe check out a YouTube video.
I played for a little bit too, and I agree. I think it was released as kind of like a budget game. It was like a $20 game or something at the time, and I don't think many people found this game, and I can see the appeal to maybe hardcore fans, but I don't think today you'd really want to deal with the load times involved with this game. All right,
Like it would be, I would be interested if they had like some sort of 3D revival that looked similar to this, maybe a little bit more open areas, and I think the concepts are there. It's just on technology that does not do it justice at all.
Yep. The next release was I haven't even played this one. It's the Wii. It's a digital only WiiWare release, and I hear it's terrible. So
Yeah, it looks like a Flash game. You watch it for a little while, and it's like really linear. Like the graphics look like a Flash game, and it was supposed to try to revive the game, and fortunately, the game next that came out did a much better job.
And these next games that came out, I've played through the first. Well, it's the Blaster Master Zero series that came out. What 2016 and
2017. It was 2017. It was like a Switch launch title, and it was also on 3DS at the time. But now you can play it on Steam and other.
I would actually highly recommend the first title at least, because I played through that one. I beat it. I got the good ending.
It's a little bit of like an expanded reimagining of this game,
and it's a fun game. I would.
They do bring in things like the take bosses we mentioned earlier. They give you more reasons to go into the optional dungeons. They do expand the story, so like the first 2 or 3 levels are pretty similar, but then they kind of expand a lot of the mechanics and things out from there. So yeah, it's definitely worth a look. I played a little bit of 2. They started to get a little bit out of their depth with 2. It didn't hook me, and I haven't played 3, but from what I've seen from 3, there's some people who think it's okay, but it doesn't seem to carry as much as the second one, and definitely not as much.
I have a similar experience with you. I never made it all the way through 2, but I would definitely say check these ones out because it's a fun way to play Blaster Master with a more updated sensibility and made for the modern gamer as opposed to us retro gamers, I guess. Anything else you want to cover, Clark?
No, I think that's about it. So that brings us to the end of this podcast. So do you want to just mention that we plan on doing a similar discussion around Shining Force 2, which you can kind of see going on in the background here. That's another game that has a little bit of nostalgia. I think a little bit more for me than for you. But if you want to play through that ahead of our discussion, feel free to. I've been dabbling a little bit in it myself. Well, not this game, but some other games in the series. Looking forward to that.
I'm excited. I've never actually played through it all the way myself. I've watched you play through it back in the day. So I'm excited I'm going to try to play through it all the way to prepare. So I'm excited.